Andorian General Kraxon recoiled with disgust at the sight before his compound. Sweat-drenched human soldiers with gritted teeth, bulging muscles and fiery eyes screaming war cries as they charged across obstacle courses, firing weapons with deadly precision, moving in perfect unison, all at the command of the short human they called General Walter Burns. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The Andorian Union was supposed to be the most advanced fighting force in the known universe, hardened by 30 years of crushing the rebel separatist scum that had brought ruin to their homeworld. They had graciously agreed to host General Burns as a political gesture to their new human allies, expecting to dazzle the Earthling with a massive display of Andorian military might. But now the human was putting on a show of his own, transforming Kraxon's elite warriors into a pack of animalistic primitives, all shirtless, rippling muscles, bulging veins, and primal aggression. As Kraxon watched in stunned silence, the human general kicked a plasma rifle out of a startled Andorian's hands, got right in the taller alien's face, and began screaming that if you held it that way in a real fight, you'd take a real plasma burst right between the eyes. Andorian bystanders gasped in shock at the display. They couldn't remember the last time a soldier had been dressed down so severely by a superior officer, let alone an alien half their size. "General Burns, I must protest!" Kraxon exclaimed, his blue skin flushing purple with rage. "This is not how we treat our warriors. We have procedures, protocols." The human slowly turned and replied, not a hint of apology in his tone. "With all due respect, General Kraxon, your procedures and protocols don't seem to be doing jack shit to stop these rebels from bombing your cities. It took us less than a week to figure that out from orbit." Burns gestured at his men, now lifting massive weights, breaking a supply crate to construct crude battering rams, taking cover behind makeshift barricades. This is how humans fight. We bite, scratch and claw for every inch on the battlefield. We use our brains just as much as our brawn. Most importantly, we never ever quit, even when it looks hopeless. That's why we're still here after thousands of years, and that's what we're going to teach your boys if you really want our help. Kraxon fell silent as he watched a third of his troops collapse from exhaustion before finishing the first human exercise. He was starting to understand the human's point. As the days wore on under the blistering alien sun, Burns pushed the Andorian troops harder than they had ever been pushed before. He had them running miles in full combat gear, packs laden with equipment bouncing heavily on their backs. Live fire exercises were conducted in scorching heat, frigid cold and driving rain. The same combat drills were rehearsed over and over until the soldiers could do them in their sleep. Kraxon watched in disbelief as many of his proud warriors collapsed in exhaustion, unable to keep up with the punishing pace set by the human general. But Burns was relentless. "On your feet, soldier," he would bellow at a fallen Andorian. "We're just getting started." During a brief respite, Kraxon confronted Burns, his tone scathing. "Can't you see you're pushing them too hard? They're at their breaking point." Burns met his gaze unflinchingly. "Pain is weakness leaving the body, General. We humans have a saying, the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle." "But we're not humans," Kraxon protested. "We Andorians aren't built for this kind of punishment." "It's not about physical strength," Burns replied calmly. "It's about heart, discipline, and never giving up, no matter how tough things get." As the training intensified, something remarkable began to happen. The Andorian troops started to transform before Kraxon's eyes. Their bearing became more erect, their movements more precise and purposeful. They started to resemble human soldiers. Burns introduced the concept of unit competition, pitting squads against each other to foster cohesion and pride. To Kraxon's surprise, he would often find the human general sharing meals with the exhausted Andorian troops, sitting right beside them in the dirt, sharing their discomfort. He would regale them with tales of human resilience against impossible odds, of courage in the face of certain death. Late one night, Kraxon stormed into Burns' quarters, rage etched on his features. "Are you trying to kill my soldiers, human? Is that your game?" Burns just laughed, a deep, genuine belly laugh. Kill them? General, I've been holding back compared to what we put humans through in basic training. The real hell that forges our warriors into steel. His expression turned serious. Your troops have more potential than they realize. As the training cycle finally ended, Kraxon stood on a hilltop, looking out over his assembled troops. They stood tall and proud, a far cry from the bedraggled lot he had witnessed collapsing in the dirt mere weeks ago. A grudging respect for the methods of the tough human general began to kindle in his heart. Just then, a messenger came running up, datapad in hand. "Urgent news from the front, General. The Separatists have launched a massive offensive. We need to deploy the troops immediately." Kraxon turned to Burns, a question in his eyes. The human simply nodded. The Andorian soldiers were about to face their greatest test to see if this training had truly forged them into a force to be reckoned with. As the transport ships touched down near the front lines, Kraxon felt a sinking feeling in his gut. The scene before him was one of utter chaos and desperation. Separatist forces had punched through the Union defenses in multiple sectors and were now pouring through the gaps, threatening to overrun the capital city. The Andorian general turned to survey his own troops and was shocked by what he saw. Union soldiers huddled in their trenches, many without weapons, their wills broken by the relentless separatist assault. Officers barked orders that went unheeded. Artillery sat silent, out of ammunition. The proud Andorian army had been reduced to a disorganized rabble. Burns wasted no time. "Get your men up and moving now," he bellowed at a nearby Andorian captain. "I want 1st and 2nd companies deploying to sectors 14 and 17 to plug those gaps. 3rd Company, set up a firebase on that ridge and start putting some fire on those separatist supply lines." The Andorian soldiers, trained to obey, started to move with purpose. Sergeants kicked their men out of their trenches and into formation. Plasma mortars were dragged into position and began to thump. Under Burns' quick commands, the Andorian troops started to resemble a functioning military once again. Over the next few hours, the newly invigorated Andorian forces began to turn the tide. Interlocking fields of plasma fire cut down separatist infantry. Coordinated mortar strikes disrupted enemy armor columns. Small teams of Andorians, moving with speed and stealth that surprised their foes, slipped behind separatist lines to take out key targets. The separatists, used to facing a crumbling foe, were caught off guard by the sudden ferocity and competence of the Andorian resistance. As night fell, Burns gathered a detachment of Andorian commandos, the best of the best. "We're going to gut the separatist command," he told them, his face streaked with grime. "We take out their leadership. We throw them into disarray." Kraxon watched in disbelief as the small force, Burns at its head, slipped away into the darkness. Hours later, the night sky lit up with a massive explosion, and separatist comms dissolved into panicked chatter. Burns and his team had destroyed the enemy headquarters. But the Andorian celebration was short-lived. With a deafening roar, a massive shape emerged from behind the separatist lines. It was a fortress, floating on anti-grav drives, its armored hide bristling with heavy plasma cannons. It began to systematically obliterate the Andorian positions, its weapons cutting through their defenses like a hot knife through butter. Burns, his face grim, watched the unfolding devastation. He knew that the Andorian troops, for all their heart and training, were not equipped to handle such a monstrosity. In the command bunker, Burns faced the assembled Andorian generals. "My men can take that thing out," he said bluntly. "The 82nd Airborne. They're the best of the best, and they're waiting in orbit." Kraxon slammed his fist on the table. "Absolutely not. We will not be dependent on humans to fight our wars." Burns got right in Kraxon's face. "This isn't about pride, it's about survival. If that thing reaches the capital, it's over. You've already shown great strength by transforming your army. Now show the wisdom to accept help when you need it." Kraxon looked at the display screen, at the massive fortress carving a path of destruction towards the heart of the Union. He closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping. Then he reached for the comms device. "This is General Kraxon, requesting immediate assistance from human forces." In the skies above, Dropships bearing the insignia of the 82nd Airborne began their descent, carrying the human soldiers who would fight alongside the Andorians in the battle to come. Burns and Craxon watched them fall from the sky, like avenging angels, ready for the final showdown that would decide the fate of an entire world. As the human dropships descended from the sky like avenging angels, the separatist forces turned their weapons skyward, filling the air with bursts of plasma fire. But the 82nd Airborne was undeterred. The dropship doors slammed open, and the elite human soldiers poured out, hitting the ground running. They were clad in sleek power armor, plasma rifles held at the ready. They moved with a speed and precision that left the Andorians gaping in awe. A human sergeant barked orders, and the soldiers spread out, their armor deflecting the separatist plasma bolts like raindrops. They returned fire with ruthless efficiency, each plasma burst finding its mark, each fallen separatist clearing the way for the Andorian advance. In the midst of the chaos, Burns found himself back-to-back with Craxon, the two generals fighting as one. Burns wielded a plasma rifle with deadly skill, while Craxon's blade flashed in the sun as he cut down separatist after separatist. "Not bad for an Andorian," Burns quipped, as he dropped a charging separatist with a well-placed shot. Craxon grunted, his blade finding the throat of another foe. "You humans aren't so bad yourselves." Together, the human and Andorian forces pushed forward, the separatists falling back before their relentless onslaught. In the distance, the massive separatist fortress loomed, its plasma cannons raining death upon the advancing troops. Burns keyed his comm. "Kingfisher, this is ground actual, requesting immediate orbital strike on the following coordinates." High above, the human battleship Kingfisher aligned its guns and let loose a barrage that shook the earth. But when the smoke cleared, the fortress still stood, its shields shimmering defiantly. Burns cursed. "Kingfisher, negative effect on target. The shield is still up." Craxon's eyes narrowed as he stared at the fortress. The shield generator. It must be inside the structure itself. Burns nodded grimly. "Then that's our target." He signaled to a group of human and Andorian special forces. "You're with us. We're taking that shield down." The infiltration team moved forward, darting from cover to cover as the fortress guns sought to pick them off. They reached the base of the structure, and Burns motioned to a small service hatch. "There, that's our way in." They pried the hatch open and clambered inside, finding themselves in a narrow service tunnel. They moved quickly, following the hum of power conduits towards the heart of the fortress. Suddenly a plasma bolt sizzled past Burns's ear. Separatist guards had spotted them. The tunnel erupted into a fierce firefight, plasma bolts crisscrossing in the confined space. Burns and Craxon fought side by side, plasma and blade finding their marks again and again. The Andorian commandos proved their worth, engaging the separatists in vicious close combat. Finally, they reached the shield generator chamber. Burns hurled a plasma grenade and ducked as it detonated, vaporizing the guards and equipment alike. Craxon hurried forward and planted the charges, his hands steady despite the chaos around him. "Charges set. Let's get out of here." But as they turned to leave, a fresh wave of separatists poured into the chamber, plasma rifles blazing. The team was cut off, trapped. Burns and Craxon shared a look. No words were needed. They took up position at the front, rifles leveled at the advancing horde. "It's been an honor, General," Burns said as he took aim. "Likewise," Craxon replied, his finger tightening on the trigger. They opened fire, plasma bolts ripping into the separatist ranks. For a moment it seemed they would be overwhelmed, but they held their ground, buying precious seconds as the charges ticked down. 3, 2, 1. The world turned white as the charges detonated. The shield generator exploded in a maelstrom of fire and shrapnel. The fortress shook, its shield flickering and dying. High above, the Kingfisher's sensors detected the shield's collapse. The order was given. A rain of destruction fell from the sky as the human ship unleashed its full might. Plasma bombs and kinetic rounds pounded the fortress, smashing through its armor, reducing its guns to molten slag. Artillery from the Andorian lines joined the barrage until the once mighty fortress was reduced to a smoking ruin. Amidst the devastation, a single human dropship descended, touching down next to the blasted service hatch. Burns and Craxon emerged, battered but alive, the surviving members of their team with them. Around them, the separatist forces threw down their weapons, their will to fight shattered with the destruction of their great fortress. The battle was won. In the days that followed, Burns and Craxon were hailed as saviors of the Andorian Union. The Prime Minister himself offered Burns the highest honors the government could bestow, but Burns demurred, insisting that the victory belonged to the Andorian soldiers and to the leadership of General Craxon. As the human forces prepared to depart, Burns and Craxon met one last time. No words were exchanged, none were needed. They clasped hands, a gesture of respect and camaraderie forged in the crucible of war. Two soldiers, two leaders, two friends. As the smoke cleared over the ruins of the separatist fortress, an eerie calm settled across the battlefield. Burns and Craxon stood side by side, their armor scorched and battered, as the Andorian troops secured the perimeter. In the days that followed, the Andorian Union celebrated their hard-fought victory. The streets of the capital were filled with cheering crowds, hailing the heroes who had saved their world from the brink of destruction. Craxon found himself at the center of attention, praised for his leadership and bravery. But he knew that none of it would have been possible without the human general who had pushed them all to be their best. As the human forces prepared to depart, Craxon sought out Burns in his temporary quarters. He found the human packing his gear, his movements efficient and purposeful. Burns looked up as Craxon entered, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "General Craxon," he said, extending his hand. "It's been an honor." Craxon gripped the human's hand firmly. "The honor has been mine, General Burns. I must admit, when you first arrived I had my doubts. I didn't believe we had what it took to win this war." Burns chuckled. "To be honest, I had my doubts too, but you and your soldiers proved me wrong. You've shown that you have the heart and the will to fight for what you believe in." Craxon nodded, his expression turning somber. "And you've shown us what it means to be a true warrior. Your training, your tactics, they saved us all." Burns waved off the praise. "It was a team effort, Craxon. We couldn't have done it without each other." The two generals shared a laugh, the tension of the past weeks melting away. Craxon reached into his pack and pulled out a long, slender object wrapped in cloth. "Before you go, I have something for you," he said, holding it out to Burns. The human took the object, unwrapping it carefully. It was a blade, its hilt intricately carved with Andorian symbols. The metal gleamed in the light, razor-sharp and deadly. "A traditional Andorian warrior's blade," Craxon explained. "You fought for us, bled for us, you are one of us now." Burns ran his fingers along the blade, his eyes shining with emotion. He looked up at Craxon, his voice thick. I don't know what to say. Thank you, my friend." Craxon clasped Burns's shoulder, his grip firm. "No, thank you for everything." The two warriors stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared experience hanging in the air. Then, with a final nod, Burns turned and strode towards his waiting ship. But as he reached the ramp, his comm crackled to life. Burns frowned, pressing the device to his ear. His expression darkened as he listened, his jaw clenching. He turned back to Craxon, his eyes hard. "We have a problem, a big one." Craxon stepped forward, concern etched on his features. "What is it?" Burns took a deep breath. "A massive alien fleet just jumped into human space. They've already overrun our outer colonies and are heading straight for Earth. Our forces are being overwhelmed." Craxon felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen firsthand the might of the human military. If they were struggling against this new threat. He squared his shoulders, his decision already made. "Then we fight alongside you as you fought alongside us. The Andorian Union stands with Earth." Burns clasped Craxon's arm, his grip strong. "I knew we could count on you, but this won't be like anything we've faced before. The reports, The casualty estimates. Craxon met his gaze unflinchingly. We are warriors, General Burns. We do not shy away from a fight, no matter the odds. Burns nodded, a grim smile on his face. Then let's give them hell. Within hours, the newly trained and equipped Andorian fleet was mobilizing, their ships falling into formation alongside the battered human navy. Craxon stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching as the stars streaked past the viewports. Beside him, Burns studied the tactical displays, his brow furrowed in concentration. The alien fleet was massive, their ships dwarfing anything the humans or Andorians had in their arsenal. They'll try to punch through our lines here and here, Burns said, pointing at the display. We need to hold them, buy time for our forces to regroup and counterattack. Craxon nodded, his mind already racing through the possible scenarios. We'll hit them with everything we've got. Fighters, bombers, boarding parties. We'll make them bleed for every inch of space. As the two fleets closed in, the void lit up with the flashes of plasma fire and the streaks of missiles. Ships on both sides erupted into flames, debris spinning off into the darkness. Craxon gripped the arms of his command chair as his ship shuddered under the impact of enemy fire. Alarms blared and crew members shouted reports, but he remained focused on the task at hand. General Burns, we've got a shot at their flagship, Craxon called over the comm. If we can take it out, it might throw their fleet into disarray. Agreed, Burns replied, his voice crackling with static. I'm on my way to your position. We'll lead the boarding party together. Craxon felt a surge of adrenaline as he donned his armor and checked his weapons. Side by side with Burns, he led the charge onto the alien flagship, his blade flashing in the dim light. They fought their way through the corridors, Andorian and human soldiers working in perfect unison. Plasma fire filled the air, the stench of burning metal and flesh overwhelming. As they neared the bridge, a group of elite alien warriors blocked their path. Burns and Craxon charged forward, their blades singing. But then, in a flash of blinding light, Burns stumbled, a smoking hole in his chest. Craxon roared in rage, cutting down the alien responsible. He cradled his friend in his arms, the human's blood staining his armor. Burns looked up at him, his eyes already starting to glaze over. I told you, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos. It's not about strength, it's about heart. And you, my friend, have more than anyone I've ever known. With a final shuddering breath, Burns went still. Craxon bowed his head, grief and fury warring in his heart. Around him, the alien bridge crew lay dead, cut down by Andorian blades. The flagship drifted, its command structure shattered. Craxon stood, taking up Burns' fallen blade. He turned to his soldiers, his voice ringing out strong and clear. The war is not over, he said, his eyes hard. But we will fight on for our fallen friends, for our way of life. The Andorian people stand tall and proud, ready to defend what we hold dear to the bitter end. And we will never forget the sacrifice of those who fought alongside us, human and Andorian alike. As the soldiers cheered, raising their blades in salute, Craxon looked out at the stars, his heart heavy but his resolve unshakable. The fight would be long and hard, but he knew that with the courage and determination Burns had instilled in them, they would prevail. The Andorian Union would stand now and always a beacon of strength and unity in a galaxy at war. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, I liked the story, and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.